Hi, in this video I'm hoping to give you a different perspective on how English could be looked at without the fear of having to memorize. There are a lot of questions learners come up with, and they are legitimate questions because the answers that are provided in course books and in language courses are not really adequate. And I'll give you some illustrations of the flaws. Syntax used to be much more flexible in English, and spelling is another example of that. Potentially, English was much more eloquent and flexible. More recently, academics and publishers and the corporate world of selling language courses got hold of our language, doing their best to standardize, simplify, explain away everything, and then globalize it. In so doing, English was confined and rendered dry, relatively lifeless. Naturally, its native speakers and non-native speakers alike revolt by expanding colloquial and slang and dialects, breaking so-called grammar rules, and rightly so. I urge you all to dismiss the flawed analyses and traditional methods of English based on Latin, that you only get to learn one half of the brain. You use one half of the brain to learn these memorizing lists, terminology, for one, to the fact that the current views don't provide fulfilling answers, merely false measures, sets of rules, so-called exceptions, which avoid puzzled academics' pressure to provide answers they don't see through, for their command of English is also truly not as it could be. It's stunted by the very rules they set within their niche. So to look at what I mean by lists, if you go to websites like Stack Exchange, where people ask questions about English. They want to know some things. They want to get more information. Some verbs are followed by ing, and others are followed by to, and that's all you need to know. But if you look at the example here, it's I enjoy swimming. Now, enjoy and adore and love and all these preference verbs, they fall into a category. They're also intellectual words. They're based on the intellect. If you say, I can't imagine, or I can imagine, you'll have a verb with an ing form followed by the nominal, so-called gerund, if you want Latin. Arguably, there is no gerund in English. And then you have I decided to. Okay, so the decision is made to do something. The to has to do with the purpose of doing something, and that's why we use to. It has nothing to do with the fact that, oh, it's decided, therefore it's to. That's what someone else has decided for you. But if you look at the rationale behind the verb, and you'll see why. So this is what learners get, a list, and you're supposed to memorize these, right? But within those there, you can see there is a logic behind these. They're connected in some way. There is also emotion involved in these. Emotion is what's been taken out of the grammar. It shouldn't be relevant, but it is. I regret it is relevant. If we risk doing what I'm doing, well, we're bold enough to get over this hurdle which prevents learners from getting over the intermediate, above the intermediate, beyond to the independent stage of learner level, and then to the advanced level, which you don't get to until you've memorized these, right? But that's not the way to go about it. If you look at this here, you've got then another list, and then a set of exceptions. Here are the ones that are followed by not, ing, nor, to. And look at that. You've got let, make, have and help. Believe it or not, help. Most people will say help to do something. I helped him to find the bookstore. Well, you're going to see that both are correct, and it's not about what's correct. It's about understanding what to means when you put it in or when you take it out. We're going to look at that more in detail now. So we've got, let's say, a group of words that mean the same thing. You've got recommend, suggest, advise, and propose. You're being told that those four verbs should take the ing form. Well, I got a surprise for you. You have three valid structures, at least, and possibly a few more. But let's look at these three. And you can put any of these four verbs into this place here. I suggest, let's take suggest. I suggest that you read this carefully. I suggest you to read this carefully. I suggest reading this carefully. All of the above are variations on this. Read this carefully. It's an imperative. And we're adding hear my advice, and finally a conditional. If you hear my advice, you will read this carefully. You'll understand here why I've put these words here in sections in asterisks. Of the three options above, I prefer number 3, as the ing affix on reading allows us to avoid you, which is not so much the focus. I'm reading, by the way, from my ebook. So the focus is actually not so much on the action, but on this, which gets more importance, which is the content matter that needs to be read carefully, more than the action of reading itself. I suggest that you read this carefully. In number 3, this is the focus, the content of what is being read, or what should be read. Number 1, here, that, the focus is on read this, because that actually is a subtle hint of the subjunctive mood. Only it's more detectable when the verb gets inflected. So I suggested that he read it carefully. Read is now in the base form without the S. You wouldn't say, I suggest that he reads it carefully. Construction of that makes it more of a subjunctive mood. Hence the reason for that structure. Finally, you have number 2. I suggest you to read it, or I recommend you to read it. Now it's actually becoming acceptable to say this because so many people are saying it. There's just so much confusion about what is the ing and then what is used with to, that people are getting them confused, and they're saying, well, I'm just going to use that. I read it just today in a teacher's forum for a website for online teaching in the Philippines. It's becoming current, obviously. But anyhow, this is my least favorite construction or syntax. One needs an object, you, followed by what is labeled infinitive clause, when actually to serves to convey a purpose, to read. Except that the real purpose is to understand what is being read and not the reading itself. So I don't expect you to just now have learned this whole aspect. I'm just showing you what's in my book and giving you the contents. And then I'm illustrating things that are in older books. Look at this. This is from an older publication, right? And you're given some examples, at least. In the older things, they'll give you some examples like this. In the newer versions, you're given an appendix. Look at that. 2014. You're given an appendix. Okay, just memorize these. And you've got some example sentences there. Memorize the gerund, which doesn't exist. Get the infinitive ones there with to, the ones without to. Oh, look, you've got some modals in there, not surprisingly, and so on. And in the end, it's just one side of the brain. But if we really get to understand what's being said, you won't fall into this. And you won't be saying, help. By the way, that help again, if you take away the to, you're back to your subjunctive mood. I need help understanding this. It's also possible you can use the ing form with help. Take a different approach, and if you study with me, we're going to look into this more in detail step by step, and you'll understand that this here is a myth. Thanks for watching.